Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everyone around you speaks a language you've never learned. Not words, but a dialect of validation, of curated moments, of endless performance. You watch them navigate this world with practiced ease, the careful angle of a photograph, the strategic timing of a post, the invisible metrics that somehow define their worth. They move through life as if haunted by an invisible audience, constantly aware of how their existence appears to strangers who may never know their names. And then, somewhere in this sea of billions, frantically documenting every breath, every meal, every fleeting thought, there are those who choose not to participate. Not because they lack access, not because they are technologically incompetent, not even because they are afraid. They simply choose silence. What does that silence mean? In a world that has essentially criminalized invisibility, what does it mean when someone refuses to be seen? When a person walks through life leaving no digital trace, no curated evidence of their existence, no algorithmic footprint, are they free or lost, connected or isolated, enlightened or delusional? The question seems simple, but its implications shake the very foundations of how we understand human nature in the modern age. Here is the paradox that haunts us. We live in an era of unprecedented connectivity, yet we have never felt more alone. We have built technologies designed to bring us closer, and instead, they have fragmented us into 1,000 digital versions of ourselves. We measure connection in followers. We measure worth in likes. We measure life in views. And in the center of this machinery of constant exposure stands a small, quiet group of people who have stepped outside entirely. They are not protesting. They are not preaching. They are simply absent from a stage the rest of us cannot seem to leave. Today we'll explore the psychology of people who never use social media, a subject that many misunderstand, but one that holds powerful insights into human behavior, emotional intelligence, and even mental resilience. Stay until the very end, because the last revelation may completely change the way you see not only social media, but yourself. Before we begin, if you're someone who seeks to understand the deeper truths of the human mind, from the reflections of great philosophers to the insights of modern psychology, then subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. What we'll uncover today may surprise you and perhaps awaken something within you. But here is what troubles us most. Their absence feels like an accusation. When you meet someone who does not use social media, something unsettling happens. You encounter a person whose identity has not been sculpted by algorithms, whose self-worth has not been validated by strangers, whose happiness does not depend on the approval of people they will never meet. And for a moment, you feel the weight of what you have surrendered to the machine. You feel it in the way they look at you, truly look at you without the distraction of their phone. You feel it in their unhurried presence, their undivided attention, their freedom from the invisible anxiety that follows the rest of us everywhere. They seem to know something we have forgotten. This is not about mere abstention from a social platform. This is about a fundamental choice regarding identity, meaning, and the nature of existence itself. Because when you refuse to participate in social media, you are not simply declining an app. You are rebelling against an entire philosophy of human worth. You are asking a dangerous question. If no one is watching, am I still valuable? If my life is not documented, does it still matter? If I perform for no audience, who am I? The psychological depth of this choice runs far deeper than most of us care to admit. It touches on our most primal fears, the fear of insignificance, the terror of being unknown, the existential dread that perhaps we are not as important as we believe ourselves to be. Those who refuse social media have already confronted these fears. They have walked through that fire and emerged differently. Not necessarily happier or more fulfilled, but changed, transformed by the choice to exist without validation. And yet, we cannot simply romanticize their silence. Some of these people retreat from digital life not out of strength, but out of sensitivity. Some hide not out of courage, but out of fear. Some abstain not because they have transcended the need for connection, but because the noise of the world has become unbearable. The truth, as it often is, lives in the shadows between these extremes. So we must ask ourselves, what do these silent observers understand about human psychology, about the self, about freedom that we, trapped in the perpetual glow of our screens, have lost? What is the nature of their peace, and at what cost was it purchased? This is where our investigation truly begins. To understand why some people reject social media entirely, we must first grasp the invisible force that keeps billions of us enslaved to it. It is not merely a technological addiction, though neuroscientists have shown that scrolling triggers dopamine responses similar to gambling. The trap runs deeper. It is rooted in a fundamental vulnerability of human consciousness that philosophers have warned about for centuries: the desperate need to be seen. Carl Jung wrote that the shadow self, the parts of us we reject or hide, grows larger when ignored. But in the age of social media, we have done something unprecedented. We have created a system that doesn't allow the shadow to remain hidden. Instead, we voluntarily construct elaborate facades, carefully curated personas designed to reflect not who we are, but who we wish to be seen as. Every post is a negotiation with our audience. Every image is a lie told in the language of authenticity. What social media has engineered, whether intentionally or not, is a profound existential trap that French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called bad faith, the act of deceiving oneself about one's own nature. Sartre argued that authentic existence requires confronting the terrifying freedom of being. We must choose who we are, moment by moment, without the comfort of predefined roles. But social media offers the opposite. It provides scripts, templates, validation systems that tell us exactly who to be. The algorithm becomes our judge. The metrics become our measure. And slowly, imperceptibly, we begin to live not for ourselves, but for the system. We stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What will perform well?" This is not freedom. This is a sophisticated form of psychological slavery. But there is a deeper layer still. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed that human beings are driven by an unconscious will, an impulse toward survival, reproduction, and dominance. Social media hijacks this will. It transforms the primal human desire for status and recognition into a digital currency that can be harvested infinitely. The more followers, the more likes, the more comments, the greater your perceived worth in the social hierarchy. It is tribalism dressed in silicon and code. Those who abstain from this system recognize, perhaps intuitively, what Aldous Huxley warned about in his prophetic work, Brave New World. He understood that the most effective totalitarianism is not one imposed by force, but one we willingly embrace. One we believe is freedom. Social media is precisely that, a voluntary prison where we convince ourselves we are free. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps, wrote that the primary human drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. Yet social media offers us the exact opposite. It offers endless distraction, masquerading as connection. It offers comparison disguised as inspiration. It offers the performance of life instead of its actual living. And in trading meaning for metrics, we lose something irreplaceable: our capacity for authentic selfhood. Those who never use social media have, consciously or unconsciously, refused this bargain. They have rejected the false promise that visibility equals worth. They have stepped outside the system that equates existence with documentation. But here is what makes them dangerous to the system. Their very absence becomes a mirror. Their silence poses a question to everyone still scrolling. What if we have been chasing the wrong thing all along? What if the validation we seek is worthless precisely because it is so easily given? What if the person worth becoming is not the one the algorithm rewards, but the one we discover when no one is watching? This is the hidden problem, and those who have stepped away already sense its truth. Most people do not realize what social media is silently stealing from them until it is already gone. It is not something that happens all at once. It is gradual, imperceptible. Like water eroding stone, the damage accumulates in layers we cannot see until the structure has fundamentally weakened. The first casualty is attention. Neuroscientist Gloria Mark has documented that the average person now has an attention span of approximately 8 seconds before seeking stimulation. Our brains, bathed in constant dopamine hits from notifications, have been rewired to crave fragmentation. We have become incapable of the deep, sustained focus that creativity, genuine understanding, and authentic self-reflection require. The mind that cannot sit still cannot think deeply, and the mind that cannot think deeply cannot know itself. But there is something more insidious happening beneath this surface fragmentation. Psychologists have identified a phenomenon called the spotlight effect, the tendency to believe that others are watching us far more closely than they actually are. Social media amplifies this effect exponentially. Every post becomes an imagined conversation with thousands. Every photo is taken with invisible eyes in mind. We begin to live as if constantly observed, and this constant self-consciousness corrodes something essential: spontaneity, authenticity, the freedom to simply be. Over time, this produces what researchers call social media-induced anxiety. It is not the anxiety of real danger, but something more insidious: the anxiety of perpetual judgment. Studies from the University of Pennsylvania have shown that heavy social media users report significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and FOMO. But the mechanism is not what most people think. It is not simply comparison, though that plays a role. It is something deeper: the exhaustion of performing constantly for an invisible audience. Consider the neurological toll. Each time you check your phone, your brain experiences a small spike of cortisol, the stress hormone. Each notification triggers a microdopamine response, followed by a crash. Over thousands of daily micro-interactions, your nervous system becomes dysregulated. Your baseline anxiety rises. Your capacity for calm diminishes. You become addicted not to joy, but to stimulation. And stimulation is not joy. Those who abstain from this system do not suffer this constant neurological assault. Their baseline cortisol remains lower. Their attention remains intact. Their capacity for boredom, which is essential for creativity and contemplation, remains undamaged. But this is where the social cost becomes apparent. The people who stay plugged in begin to perceive those who have withdrawn as strange, suspicious, even threatening. How can someone not want to be connected? How can they not care about staying in the loop? This incomprehension reveals something profound. Those still trapped in the system cannot imagine life outside it because their brains have been literally reconfigured by it. The synaptic pathways that once supported sustained attention and introspection have atrophied. And here is the most devastating consequence of all: the loss of interiority. Philosopher Hannah Arendt warned that totalitarian systems succeed by destroying the inner life, the capacity for thought, independent of ideology. Social media does this not through force, but through seduction. When your inner world is constantly interrupted by external validation systems, when your thoughts are shaped by algorithms, when your identity is reflected back to you through metrics, you begin to lose touch with who you actually are beneath all the performance. You become hollow, not empty hollow. There is activity, movement, engagement, but nothing at the center. The self that exists independent of documentation begins to fade like a photograph left in sunlight. Those who have never entered this system, or who have stepped out of it, preserve something increasingly rare: an inner life that belongs entirely to them, untouched, uncommodified, real. And in that preservation lies a kind of psychological resilience the rest of us have forfeited. But here is where the narrative shifts. Here is where powerlessness transforms into possibility. Because understanding the trap is the first step toward escaping it. And the rebellion against social media is not a violent upheaval. It is something far more radical. It is a quiet reclamation of consciousness. The first revolution is philosophical. Philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned against what he called slave morality, the acceptance of values imposed upon us by external forces. Social media is precisely this: a system that has convinced us that the values it measures, visibility, likability, viral potential, are the values that matter. But they are not. They are arbitrary metrics designed by engineers and algorithms to keep us engaged. To break free, you must first ask a dangerous question: whose values am I living by? Those who reject social media have answered this question. They have chosen to live by their own measure of what is meaningful, not what trends, not what performs, not what attracts approval from strangers, but what, in the deepest part of their being, they recognize as true. This requires what psychologist Rollo May called the courage to create. It is not the courage to be brave in the face of external danger, but the courage to exist authentically when the entire system rewards performance. It is the willingness to be boring, ordinary, unseen. And paradoxically, this willingness liberates something extraordinary. Consider Henry David Thoreau. He did not retreat to Walden Pond to escape society. He retreated to reclaim his mind. In solitude, away from the noise of collective expectation, he wrote words that would outlive the endless chatter of his contemporaries. Or Rilke, who understood that creative life requires what he called fertile loneliness, not isolation, but the deliberate choice to step away from the constant demand for social performance so that one's inner world could develop undisturbed. The second revolution is neurological. When you disconnect from the constant dopamine drip of social media, something profound happens. Your brain begins to rewire itself. Attention returns. Boredom, that precious, overlooked state, becomes available again. And boredom is where creativity lives. The mind that is bored begins to wander, to explore, to imagine. This is not laziness. This is the brain's natural state of deep work. Studies have shown that people who take breaks from social media report improved sleep quality, better focus, and significantly reduced anxiety within weeks. The nervous system, given relief from constant stimulation, begins to regulate itself. Cortisol levels drop. The capacity for presence returns. You begin to remember what it feels like to simply be, without documentation, without validation. But the third revolution, and this is the most dangerous one, is spiritual. When you step away from social media, you enter what the existentialist philosophers called the void. It is uncomfortable. It is disorienting. For the first time in years, you are alone with your own thoughts without distraction. And many people cannot bear this. The silence is too loud, the emptiness too real. But those who endure it, who sit with the discomfort long enough, discover something remarkable. In that void is freedom. Not the false freedom of endless choice and content, but authentic freedom. The freedom to define yourself without external reference points. The freedom to want things that have no audience. The freedom to be. This is not a return to the past. It is an evolution beyond the current trap. It is the recognition that human consciousness evolved for millennia without these systems, and it can thrive again without them. The rebellion is not anti-technology. It is pro-consciousness, pro-authenticity, pro-self. And it begins with a single choice, the choice to be unseen. Now we arrive at the truth that changes everything. The truth that those who have never used social media have discovered either consciously or through lived experience. And it is not what you think. The revelation is not that social media is evil. It is not that technology is destroying us. It is not even that we should all abandon our devices and retreat to the wilderness. The revelation is this. The people who never use social media have remembered what the rest of us have forgotten, that reality itself is the ultimate validation. Let me explain what this means. When you live without social media, you are forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Your experiences must be validated by the experience itself, not by the response it generates. A sunset is beautiful not because 500 people liked your photo of it, but because you stood there and felt its beauty move through you. A conversation is meaningful not because you documented it, but because you were fully present for it. Your life has value not because others witnessed it, but because you lived it. This is what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the capacity to find meaning and satisfaction from within rather than from external rewards. Research by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan has shown that people driven by intrinsic motivation experience greater psychological well-being, deeper satisfaction, and more authentic self-concept than those dependent on external validation. But here is where it gets profound. Those who abstain from social media have not simply preserved their intrinsic motivation, they have cultivated something far more rare. They have developed what philosopher Martin Buber called the I-thou relationship with existence itself. They experience life as a dialogue, not a performance. They meet each moment as a subject encountering another subject, not as an observer cataloging objects for later display. This is the consciousness that has been lost in the age of documentation. We have transformed life from something we participate in to something we curate, from something we experience to something we display. And in doing so, we have severed ourselves from the very thing we were trying to capture. The Zen Buddhists have a saying, "The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon." Social media has become humanity's collective finger, endlessly pointing, while we forget to look at what we are pointing toward. Those who have stepped away have simply lowered their finger and looked up. But here is the final revelation, the one that may disturb you most. You do not need to delete your accounts to reclaim this consciousness. The rebellion is not about the technology. It never was. It is about the relationship you have with your own existence. You can use social media and still preserve your inner life if you recognize it for what it is. A tool, not a mirror, not a measure, not a judge. Simply a tool that you can pick up and put down without it defining who you are. The people who never use social media are not special because they abstain. They are special because they have maintained sovereignty over their own consciousness, and that sovereignty is available to anyone willing to claim it. It requires only one thing: the willingness to exist without proof, to have experiences that no one knows about, to feel things that never get expressed, to be someone when no one is watching, to find the courage to let moments die without preserving them, trusting that their value was in the living, not the recording. This is the ultimate freedom. Not freedom from technology, but freedom from the need to be seen in order to be real. The people who never use social media have been trying to tell us this all along, not through words, but through their quiet presence, through their undivided attention, through their unhurried engagement with life as it actually is, not as it appears through a screen. They are not rejecting the world. They are fully inhabiting it. And their greatest gift to the rest of us is this: they prove it is still possible, that another way of being exists, that consciousness can survive the noise, that authenticity has not been extinguished. They are living proof that you can still be real in a world obsessed with performance. And perhaps if you are brave enough to sit in the discomfort, to face the void, to exist without validation, you can rediscover what they have known all along. You were always enough. You just forgot. The screen never had to tell you. The metrics never mattered. The validation you sought was already complete. You were whole before the first like. You will be whole after the last. The people who never use social media simply never forgot this truth. And now, neither will you.